Hello again, everyone. This is the second part of lecture number 22, The Fall of Rome, for History 231, Ancient Mediterranean World. And we left off last time talking about our friend Julian the Apostate, quite a fascinating character, the last pagan emperor of Rome, who, because he didn't take my class, did get himself killed fighting against the Sasanian Persians. And that is kind of it, because once the Roman emperors are not going to be pagans anymore, there is nothing really stopping the Christian side of things from pretty much taking over politics in the Roman world, and that's going to have a long-lasting impact on both Christianity and on Rome. And it's always an interesting question: did Rome become Christian, or did Christianity become Roman? And that is probably a lot more complicated a question than we might think. But the problem they have, once they say, okay, we're going to go with Christianity, we're just going to do that, it's going to be our religion, is they have to figure out what is Christianity. And there is really one central conflict which is really going on. It's boiling through the Roman world during this time, and that is the question of the nature of Christ. What is the nature of Christ? We call this Christology. So what is the nature of Christ? Is Christ the same as God, as the Trinitarians say, Father, Son, Holy Spirit? Or is Christ different from God and therefore subordinate to God? We call these people subordinationalists. And these two groups don't agree with each other. They don't get along. And the problem is twofold. Number one, the stakes are high because Christianity is now rich and there's a lot of money at stake. And whenever you make money the big thing, people are going to fight extra hard because, well, everybody loves money. So that's going to be one side. The other side is even more serious, though, because they believe that if you got this wrong, if you didn't worship properly, if you did not follow the correct form of Christianity, you're going to go straight to hell. You're going to go to hell for eternity. So the stakes are very high. You don't want to screw this thing up and endanger your immortal soul, to say nothing of your pocketbook. So this is what the Romans are having to deal with. And the problem is they didn't have a way of solving this religiously. Instead, they're going to try and solve it politically. And this is the thing: Christianity as a religion is not very good at politics. Other religions tend to do a little bit better, but even there, whenever you mix politics and religion, you're going to get some problems. You're going to get some friction, because religion and politics do two separate things, two very different things. Religion deals with eternal questions. What is the nature of the universe? Why are we here? These are the kinds of questions religion is really good at trying to solve and help you get through as you go through life. Politics is really good about how much money should we charge people on the tolls on the turnpike. That's what politics is designed to do. Politics is supposed to be practical, and it's much better at practical things. It's not good at ideological things. And countries and belief systems which try to mix the two, it doesn't go well. Communism tried back in the 20th century. That didn't go well at all. Look where they wound up, right? So you cannot mix religion and politics very effectively and have it work very well. Now, some religions do better than others. Christianity, as it happened, is one which does not do very well at all, mixing those two, because of course the early Christians didn't have politics. They were not politically involved. They were a tiny little minority worshiping in the sewers, and so they didn't have political power. They never had to develop political institutions. And so there really aren't any good Christian political institutions talked about, say, in the Bible. Then again, this is different from other religions. Islam is going to take a different approach. Islam is going to be a little bit better at politics, and so Muslims are able to mix politics and religion a little bit better, but even they run into problems, because no religion gets it right all the time with this. These are not things that mix well. These are oil and water. So that's something to think about. But anyway, so Julian is a bump in the road, right? Julian is a bump in the road, and after he's gone, we have Christian emperors, and they have to settle this question, right? And the big question again, the nature of Christ here. Well, what happens? Well, this goes on for a while. All right, and here's the thing: if the emperor likes the Trinitarian side, then they're going to get the upper hand. But if the emperor happens to like the subordinationalist side, they're going to get the upper hand. So who knows which way it's going to go? It kind of depends on who the emperor is and what the emperor believes. Well, eventually, after a lot of squabbling and fighting and all sorts of unpleasantness, we get to a fellow named Theodosius. And you'll notice that Theodosius gets 2 stars. Along with Constantine, he's a big deal, because Theodosius does 2 things, 2 really important things, which are going to change human history forever. All right? The first thing that he does is he divides the Roman Empire in half into an eastern and western half. And each side of the Roman Empire, after Theodosius is gone, is going to be inherited by one of his sons, and they're going to be the emperor of each half of the empire. It's a practical situation. The empire is so big, it's very hard to run, and so Theodosius figures if we just split the empire in half, Rome will rule on the western side, and Constantinople will rule on the eastern side, and I'll have an emperor in each one, and they'll be related, so it's kind of all the same family, but that'll make it a little easier to run. And he sets this up, and when he dies, his two sons will take over for him. And this is going to have a massive impact on the world, because as we're going to see, the western half of the Roman Empire doesn't last very long. They go down really fast. The eastern half, they last 1,000 more years. And this is going to have a massive impact on everything else. So this is an important thing to keep in mind. It's going to have a huge impact, especially on Christianity, as we will see. So that's an important thing. The second thing that Theodosius does, which is a huge deal, is Theodosius says, I've had quite enough of this arguing about Christianity and blah, 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 and I'm a Christian, and all my family are Christians, the people of power are Christians, so I'm going to pass a new rule. And here's my new rule. If you're going to be in the Roman Empire, you have to be a Christian. It suddenly, under Theodosius, actually becomes illegal not to be a Christian. Which is kind of ironic, because it was like maybe a century or so earlier that it was illegal to be a Christian, and now it's illegal not to be a Christian. You gotta wonder, can these people make up their minds? But anyway, this is what he does, and this is a very, very big deal. Now, this doesn't mean suddenly everyone becomes Christians, right? There's certainly going to be Jews. They're still around, all right? They're still kind of a persecuted minority in the Roman Empire, and they're still around, and there are still pagans. They have not gone anywhere. But now the stage is really set to start pushing, using political power, the forced push towards everyone becomes a Christian. And over the next several centuries, that's kind of what's going to happen here. That's kind of what's going to happen. So this is a big deal, but the same problem remains. What is Christianity? Is Christ the same as God? Is Christ subordinate to God? And this is how you're going to have to figure this out. So what are you going to do? Well, while this is all going on, there's other problems happening, and namely, the northern border of the empire is under increasing pressure from all sorts of people up there who are not part of the Roman world. Goths and Germans and people like that, and they're banging against the border. And they're getting increasingly hard on that border. It's getting very hard to hold the border. More and more, the Roman army is made up of people from these groups anyway. So the long northern border of the Roman Empire is really under increasing pressure in this period. And remember, the western half of the empire has a much longer northern border than the eastern half. And this is one of the big reasons the western half isn't going to last all that long. So this becomes a serious problem. So we have these emperors and we have these Romans trying to hold the line under this increasing amount of pressure that is coming in from the north. And some of this pressure gets really, really hard, really, really bad. So the situation starts becoming a much more serious kind of problem here. All right, so with that in mind, let's talk a little bit about East and West. Because again, Eastern Christianity is going to go one way, Western Christianity is going to go the other way. And the two are going to become increasingly different. They're both Christianity, but increasingly different. So if we want to understand this process, we've got to look at some very important figures. And perhaps one of the most important figures is a fellow named Augustine of Hippo. Augustine of Hippo, who gets 2 stars, you'll notice. Augustine of Hippo is one of the most important figures in human history. He's a very, very big deal. Sort of. It depends a little on where you are. So let's talk a little bit about this here. So the Trinitarians say that Jesus is the same as God, and this becomes the official line. Okay, the subordinationalists have lost the fight. They're increasingly being pushed out of the picture. They're still around, but they're getting pushed out of the picture here. Okay, great. But now we've got to start figuring out other important things here. Well, the subordinationalists, again, because they're still around, are under increasing pressure. And a fellow named Ambrose of Milan, and he gets himself a star, you'll notice. Ambrose of Milan, he is remembered as this really nice guy because he's the guy who's going to make Augustine a Christian. So he's a very big deal for that reason. But here's the thing about Ambrose of Milan. He wasn't a very nice guy. He thought that subordinationalists were evil and terrible and bad and heretics, and they needed to be destroyed and punished and run out of town, and they're very, very bad. And he was really nasty to them. He had no problem playing hardball. He had no problem playing dishonestly. He had no problem being nasty here. He actually managed to maneuver one of his subordinationalist opponents, a fellow named Palladius, all right, into a debate. And when Palladius made a tiny little mistake, what did our friend Ambrose do? He accused him of heresy. Oh my gosh, God hates you, and you're a bad person. You're not a good Christian, blah, 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 blah. And he got him into all kinds of trouble. This guy played hardball. He did not mess around here. He turned on the pagans in Rome, the remaining pagans in Rome. He says these people are very, very bad, especially the ones in the Senate, because the Senate still had some authority at this time. All right? And here's what he did. He was really good at doing something bullies do, and this is something you'll notice bullies do this a lot. It's a characteristic of bullies. Bullies are not nice people, okay? Here's what bullies do. Bullies are really, really good at being bullies and picking on you and pushing you and getting at you and being mean to you, and every time you might say, stop, they say, oh my God, you're being mean to me. I'm being bullied. I'm the victim here. Bullies are really, really good at claiming that they are the victims, that they are the ones being persecuted. But in fact, they're the ones doing the persecution. It's something to watch out for. When you look at people in life, if you ever get someone who is always shrieking, oh, me, poor, poor me, I'm being bullied, take a close look at them, and there's a good chance you're going to find them actually doing the bullying. And this is what Ambrose does, all right? So he goes out and he says, oh my God, these horrible pagans are persecuting me. They're being mean to me. Oh, poor, poor me. Oh. In fact, he was the bully, all right? He was the bully because he's a serious, hardcore guy. He doesn't mess around. And he's firmly of the opinion that everyone needs to be Christian, and not just Christian, but the kind of Christian he likes. His kind of Christian. And he's a really sharp guy. This guy is no fool, all right? He knows what he's doing. He knows his stuff. So just because he wasn't the nicest guy in the world doesn't mean he's stupid. In fact, he's very, very smart and very, very clever. All right, he's very, very clever. And so, of course, what he's doing is he's pushing his version of Christianity, his Christian Trinitarianism, on more or less everybody else. Now, the biggest impact that our friend Ambrose is going to have, however, is the guy he brings into Christianity, and that's St. Augustine, Augustine of Hippo, who, again, with 2 stars, is one of the most important thinkers in all of human history. So let's take a look at this guy here, our friend Augustine, all right? No question, he's one of the most influential Christian thinkers of all time. Who was he? Well, his interesting thing is he's primarily a philosopher. He was actually very good at philosophy. All those things like logic and this kind of stuff. He's very, very good at that stuff. Very, very, very sharp. All right? And we know a fair amount about this guy because he wrote a book. He wrote an autobiography. Now, here's the thing. Usually when someone writes an autobiography, it's going to be all about, I'm a great guy. Look at how wonderful I am. Look at all the great stuff I've done. Autobiographies tend to be exercises in ego. Oh, man, I'm so cool. Everyone should think I'm cool. And I'm going to leave my legacy. Presidents do this. This is why whenever you read the presidential memoirs of presidents, you got to be careful as a historian because they're not going to talk about the stuff they got really wrong. Oops, I sure screwed that up. They're not going to do that. They're going to talk about the stuff they got right and how great they are. This is why you don't just build off of biographies, especially not autobiographies. You get other people writing regular biographies, and they're a little more careful. Well, Augustine's autobiography is kind of the exception to the rule, because Augustine's autobiography is called The Confessions. And here's what he says. Oh, man, he says, I used to be a scumbag. I was a total jerk. Man, was I a bad guy. Now, why would he do that in his confessions, in his autobiography? Well, the reason he does it is to emphasize how it changed him when he found God. I used to be a complete scumbag. Now I'm not because of God. That's really what he's doing in his confessions. That's kind of the thing. It's fascinating reading because he's brutally honest with himself. Because he wasn't always a nice guy when he was younger, all right? Of course, he wasn't always a nice guy when he was older either, as we'll see, but he was not a nice guy when he was younger. Womanizing, partier, all sorts of things here. And here's the thing. He was born on November 13th of 354 AD, and he was born in Numidia, and he dies in 430 AD. His father's a pagan, but his mother's a Christian, okay? Her name was Monica, and she was a very devout Christian, and she had a huge influence on his life. Augustine was kind of a mama's boy. And that's not necessarily all bad, right? Being a mama's boy may be a very good thing if you got the right mom, all right? I personally have a great mom, so that's great, all right? So here's the deal, all right? she has a lot of influence on Augustine's life, and she's watching her fair-haired boy, and she wants him to be a Christian. But here's the thing about Augustine. This is something we got to give the guy credit for, all right? He was really honest. He would not believe in something. He would not adopt a religion or something like that unless he was sure, absolutely sure, that it was right. He didn't pretend. He's not one of those people who pretend to be Christians. He's going to be a Christian because he believes in Christianity. And if he doesn't believe in Christianity, he won't be a Christian. And so here's what he does. He is a smart guy, and he starts by trying on different religions for size. I'll try this religion, see how it goes. Didn't quite answer my question, didn't know what I want, I'll drop it. I'll try that religion and see if that goes. Try that, didn't work. All right. One of the religions he tries is Manichaeanism. Now, we've already met Manichaeanism. We've met Mani. The basic idea behind Manichaeanism was good and evil. It's a Zoroastrian idea turned in a funny direction. Right? And according to Mani, according to Manichaeans, here's how it works. The universe around us, this world right here, is bad. It's hopelessly corrupted by evil. It's very, 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 very bad. And so anything that feels good is bad. So good food, that's bad. All right. Good wine, that's bad. Sex, that's bad. All things that feel good are bad because the physical body, your body, this body here, is a bad thing. All right? The only escape from this is through spiritual purity. That's the way Manichaeans work. And so Augustine was a Manichaean priest for a while. He got into this. This was his thing. So he gets into Manichaeanism, and it does not answer his question. Then he's honest enough with himself that he says, okay, this didn't work, and he gets out. So he gets out of Manichaeanism, but here's the thing. A lot of Manichaean ideas appear to have stuck in his brain because he kept a whole bunch of Manichaean ideas as well. So after he tries out all these various and sundry religions and philosophies, Neoplatonism, for example, for size, he comes back to Christianity, and he comes up with some really interesting ideas. His view of God is based upon Manichaean and Neoplatonic ideas. All right, and he says basically this: existence is a good thing. Existing is good, non-existence is therefore bad. But what really exists? If existence is good, what exists? And he says only God exists. The only thing that truly exists is God, and therefore only God is truly good. Everything else, including you and me and Homer Simpson and everything else, is actually bad. Is actually bad. And the only way you get out of this is God. The root of all evil, he says, is the desire to be independent of God. If you want to be independent of God, you're on the wrong track and you're going to be evil. No matter how nice you are, no matter what you do, the root of all evil is the desire to be independent of God. He talks about the personality of God. He sees the Trinity as one person who manifests in three different ways here, all right? And it's an interesting idea. He believes that God is the only thing keeping the universe in existence at all, keeping the universe functioning, and that's an important thing, all right? And then he had another idea, and he did not invent this idea. He's not the guy who came up with this idea, but he's the guy who really makes it go. And that is the concept of original sin. Original sin. So what is original sin anyway? Well, here's how it works, all right? There's Adam and there's Eve, all right? And they're in the Garden of Eden, everything's cool, everything's fine, and God says to them, listen, you can do whatever you want, hang out here, name stuff that's cool, but don't eat from that fruit over there. Don't eat from that tree. That's not good. That's the tree, the fruit of knowledge comes from that tree, and don't eat that. So what do? Well, the snake comes along. Remember Sneaky Snake? Sneaky Snake comes along. Sneaky Snake says, oh, come on, it's okay. And Eve says, oh, okay. She takes a bite. She learns, by taking a bite, the difference between good and evil. She says, hey, Adam, you got to try this. And I always think, hey, Adam. And every time I think of Adam in this case, I do think of our friend Homer Simpson. Okay, right? Adam's not that bright at this point, so she gives him some. He eats it. Boom. Suddenly, he understands the difference between good and evil. God comes back. God discovers this. God is not happy. I told you not to do that. Don't you listen? You guys got a problem up here? Right? You got a problem? And according to the book of Genesis, shortly after that, God kicks Adam and Eve out of the Garden of Eden. Out the door. Out you go. He kicks them out. Now this is in Genesis 2 and 3. All right, this is the basic early part of the Bible. And what Augustine did is he takes this idea and he gives it a Manichaean twist. He gives it a strange and interesting Manichaean twist, because what he's saying is that this was the first sin. This was the original sin. The idea of original sin means that Adam and Eve sinned. They broke the rules. They got into trouble, and they were kicked out of paradise. They were kicked out of the Garden of Eden. And then once they're kicked out of the Garden of Eden, they're out in the world around us. And we've got to all deal with it. But here's what Augustine also says. All right, here's what he also says. When they sinned, when they committed that original sin, Adam and Eve committed the first original sin, and that sin is like a genetic disease. Now, the way genetic diseases work is they're not contagious. You can't catch a genetic disease. You're either born with it or you're not. All right? And let's face it, a lot of people are born with some little issue in their DNA that makes, something happen. I have several of those myself, right? Bad bones and a few other things. So I know something about genetic diseases. You can't spread them. They're not contagious. They are something you are inheriting, and you got to live with it. Sickle cell anemia is one of the most well-known of these. It's a horrible, horrible disease, and hopefully they're coming up with ways to try and cure it with genetic engineering and so forth. But the idea of original sin is based on this, basically the same idea. Once Adam and Eve sin, once they sin, guess what? Every descendant they have inherits that sin. Every descendant they have will inherit their sin. And therefore, every one of us, you and me and Homer Simpson and Mr. McGee and every human being who has ever lived, because they're descended from Adam and Eve, is tainted by that sin that Adam and Eve did. It's a genetic disease kind of thing. And so we are all in sin. Just by being born, we're born in sin. That's Augustine's idea. And that means every single one of us is dirty. Every single one of us is bad. And every single one of us is going to go straight to hell. That's Augustine's idea of original sin. That's Augustine's idea of original sin. It's actually pretty grim. It's pretty darn grim. Now the question is going to be, how do you get out of this? Because remember what I've said, if you have a religion which basically argues that everything sucks, period, and that's the end of that, and the whole universe just sucks, and everything's horrible, and that's just awful, and that's bad, no one's going to sign on to your religion. Your religion's got to give people something to hope for, something to aspire to. It's got to make their lives better. If religions don't do that, they don't last. It's just one of the facts of history. So the question is going to be, how do we take Augustine's incredibly grim and dark view of original sin and turn it into a religion that's going to not only survive but even thrive? And that is a question for our next discussion.